This session introduces measures of central tendency as simple tools for seeing what is typical in a dataset. We will start by understanding mode, and then proceed to median and mean in other video segments. Remember that we are keeping the focus on practical interpretation rather than formulas. You will see how most common values can guide real decisions using small business examples. By the end, you should be able to identify whether mode is a valid measure for the decision you're trying to make, or a number that you should question. You have heard the word average in almost any data presentation or visual that you've been exposed to. Average is also called a measure of central tendency because it gives you one number that stands in for a whole group of observations. Its purpose is simple: make large or messy datasets easier to grasp at a glance. When you know what is typical in your data, you can design policies, offers, or services that fit most of your customers or stakeholders. This helps you avoid relying on outliers or personal anecdotes when making decisions. It also shapes the story you tell about your data, because how you define average will influence your narrative and your priorities. Understanding these measures is less about math and more about sharpening your business judgment. The three most commonly used averages are mean, median, and mode, and knowing which is the most appropriate one to focus on matters in decision-making. Although most statistics books introduce mean, median, and mode in that order, this certificate deliberately starts with mode because it is the most intuitive for many people. Once mode feels comfortable, median becomes the next step, since it relies on ordering data and finding the middle case. After that, the arithmetic mean becomes easier to grasp because you already understand that data can cluster and can be described by a central value. For business practice, this learning path makes it more likely you will actually use these measures, rather than treating them as abstract formulas. The goal is steady confidence, not memorizing equations. Modes and other averages are not just technical details. They are tools for telling clearer, more honest stories about your data. When you match the measure to the type of data, you avoid forcing a mean or median where a mode is more meaningful, especially with categories. Describing the modal group or value brings majority patterns to the surface and keeps you from being distracted by unusual cases. Each time you cite an average, link it explicitly to a decision, such as targeting, resource allocation, or policy design. That habit turns statistics into a practical language for everyday business choices. Mode is often the easiest entry point into central tendency because it simply identifies the value that appears most often in your data. If you are looking at categories like product type or race or ethnicity, the mode is the category with the highest count. If you are looking at numbers like age or sales amount, the mode is the numerical value that repeats the most. In notation, you may see mode written as MO, but the important idea is that it points to what is most common or typical in everyday language. This simplicity makes mode an accessible way to start thinking about how data clusters around certain values. What is the most commonly occurring value of weekly sales of a product in your company? Does it set your expectations of future sales? If yes, then you are using the mode to guide your expectations as the average measure. A frequent mistake is to confuse the mode with the frequency of that mode. In the example here, HISP white appears 4 times in a sample of 10 people. So the mode is HISP white, not the number 4. The number 4 is just the frequency, or how many cases share that category. For decision makers, this distinction matters because you act on the value, not the count itself. You design outreach or services for the modal group, not for the number 4. Keeping this clear prevents misinterpretation when you scan tables and quickly label the average in your head. This confusion often gets magnified when dealing with quantitative data instead of qualitative data. If you have 10 weeks in a quarter with 200 units sold each week, the mode is not 10 weeks, but 200 units. If you consistently use units alongside numbers, you can minimize the risks of errors in reading tables or data-based reports. In the race and ethnicity example, each business owner is assigned to a category such as HISP white or other race or ethnicity combinations. The first step is to organize those owners into a frequency table that shows how many fall into each category. Once that is done, the mode is simply the category with the largest frequency, which in the example is HISP white, with 4 businesses out of 10. From a business perspective, that modal category represents the most typical profile, within this small sample. This can shape how you frame communication, design support programs, or understand representation among business owners in that area. For numerical data like age, the process is similar, but we typically begin by sorting the data. Sorting the ages of the business owners from lowest to highest makes any repeats immediately visible. In the example, 55 appears 3 times, more than any other age, so the mode of age in that sample is 55. That value then represents the most common age among those business owners, which can influence how you think about experience levels, generational perspectives, or targeted services. Even if you use Excel to identify the mode, the business value lies in interpreting what that modal age suggests about a specific sample. Remember that the purpose of studying a sample is to make reasonable estimates about the population. If you misread what the sample represents, the error will magnify when you extrapolate your assumptions to the population while making decisions. Not every dataset has a single clear mode. In some cases, 2 or more values share the same highest frequency, leading to what we call bimodal or multimodal distributions. Visually, you might think of 2 peaks in a distribution, each representing a strong cluster of cases. In business terms, this can signal that you have more than one typical group within your data, perhaps 2 main customer segments, or 2 age bands that dominate. Recognizing multiple modes invites you to tailor decisions or offerings to each cluster instead of assuming a single average user. Mode offers a straightforward way to see which value or category dominates your data, making it highly usable for both qualitative and quantitative business questions. It is particularly useful when parsing qualitative data because it shows where clusters of your target variable lie. Always remember to observe the mode alongside units to differentiate between the value and the frequency. When you encounter 2 or more modes, take that as a signal that you may be serving multiple main groups that each deserve attention. As we move on to median, quartiles, percentiles, and mean, keep this same interpretive mindset so that each measure supports more informed, more deliberate decisions.